When you download the Baker's app, you have easy access to savings every day. Get the most out of weekly sales and receive personalized coupons to save on your favorite items, all while earning 1 fuel point for every $1 spent. Baker's makes it easy to save while you shop, whether it's in-store or online, so you get the most value out of every trip, every time. Download the Baker's app now to save big on your next purchase. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Must have a digital account to redeem offers. Restrictions may apply. See site for details.
Welcome to Bite-Sized Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite-Sized Bios. This week we are going to cover Napoleon Bonaparte. But before we get to that, I want to cover if there's anything we missed from the last week's episode. Last week's episode of HDTH was on mermaids. Learned a lot about our friends of Finn, you know, the ones from down under. I'm not talking about Australia. I'm not sure if there's anything that I missed. I mean, I feel like I missed an opportunity to really key in on like the genealogy of like the mythology. I know I kind of threw it in there at the end, and I could barely kind of understand even what I was saying. It's probably not much of a point, but I thought it was interesting, and I guess I'll just hammer this point home. I just thought it was interesting that how much imagery and mythology made it into The Little Mermaid. Like if you watch it, you think it's just a cartoon, right? But the older you get, or the more research you do, you realize like there's a lot, you know, to it. Like the manatee, who was a slave to them, and we really see that the initial idea of a mermaid, or as far as like where the word comes from, is like, you know, fish slave. And then the fact that the Triton is related to Zeus and Poseidon. There's just all of this. It didn't just happen. But yeah, I don't know if there's much more to actually say about it. I'm sure I missed some things. I'm sure people will eventually let me know. But yeah, I don't think there's that much more to say about it. And as always, you know, 7 days a week, we have the hdthappen.com over there. You find out how things are happening. You see more of the extras about last week's episode, about last week's BSB, any of that stuff. You can read the blog if you'd like. If you want to give us 5 stars, we would love it. If you want to give us 2 and tell us why you don't want to give us 5, also works as well. Let's see, is there anything else I want to say before we get out of here? I don't do the what am I watching or what am I listening to on this particular these types of mini episodes. So, no, I think that's about it. Without further ado, let's learn about Napoleon Bonaparte. All right, so today we are going to talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. And I looked up all the different possible pronunciations of this guy's name, because I honestly for a long time thought it was like Bonaparte, right? It's not. It's just Bonaparte. He was born on August the 15th of 1769. His family is from Corsica, which is an island in between France and Italy, basically off the coast of both of them. And it's kind of gone back and forth throughout the years as to who's actually had control over it. When Napoleon was born, it was France who had control over Corsica. But it is an Italian, it's kind of like, I think they have a more Italian culture, or at least they did during this time. Again, I don't know what modern day Corsica is like. His father's name was Carlo Maria di Bonaparte, and his mother's name was Maria Letizia Romolino. All these just, they have so much, there's so much behind that. So cool to say those names. His family was of Italian nobility, right, but more on the outer skirts of it. So it's like, yeah, they were like connected to the aristocracy of Italy, but like way, way out. Nobody important. And so basically he was treated as a regular person, not like any actual type of royalty. His family had come from Italy to Corsica about 150 years before that. So like, you know, I said they were part of the Italian aristocracy, but like a very, very, very ancillary. So Napoleon first set foot in France in 1778 because he had a scholarship to the Royal Military College. He attended there for 5 years, wherein he never actually went home during that time, and he became a loner during his time at that school because he was basically not a part of the upper crust elite. He was seen as like a country boy who didn't understand French. So he was just not somebody that they were really trying to associate with. And so at the age of 15, he was promoted to the Royal Military Academy in Paris. It was both a finishing school and a war college. He became a second lieutenant in the French army at 16, but due to his status as a lower level of nobility, he wasn't actually eligible for the top positions in the military that he thought that he actually warranted. And during this time, he also tried his hand at writing. He would also do so later in his life when he was exiled on St. Helena. We'll get to that later. The French Revolution and his return to Corsica. Right, so it is the French Revolution that really changed things for Napoleon, really shook things up. This would help to get rid of the privileges that had kept him from truly succeeding in the army before, because when the revolution happened, it kind of changed the ideas of who could actually be in control. At the age of 23, he took a leave of absence from the French army and came down to Corsica and to work in the Corsica's National Guard. His goal was to try to take over Corsica, right? But when he got there, he realized his political ideas were not the same as the other men in his country. And Napoleon was still sympathetic to the crown, but the leadership in Corsica wanted their independence, so they were really kind of butting heads. And this created a conflict that led Napoleon to flee from there and come back to France. So he left France to go to Corsica, got to Corsica, they were like, bro, nah, and then he went back to France. So by 24, he is banished from Corsica. He only recently, last year, tried to get there to Corsica, and he left with his mothers, brothers, and sisters for good old France. Upon his arrival, he was reinstated into the French army, and the revolution was still alive and well, and by then the king and queen had been murdered, and Napoleon found himself stationed in Toulon as an artillery captain. He fought well during this post here, and defended the city against the British, and was promoted to brigadier general. I believe at this time he was actually, his horse, I think it was said his horse was shot and he was stabbed, and so then that kind of, everyone was like, whoa, like Napoleon, he can really take a hit, and they really enjoyed his generaling. And so by 1795, Napoleon was back in Paris, and France had a new constitutional government. There was an uprising in October of that year, which resulted in Bonaparte using cannon fire, and on some of the uprisers, cannonballed some people to stop the revolt. And it was this action that led him to being named commander of the Army of the Interior at age 26. They were like, we love how you just cannonballed those dudes, dude. So like now, commander of the Army of the Interior. And he really just goes on. I mean, he fights some wars. I'm not going to get too deep into it, because the war part of it is, I don't think it's as important as the way he ascended his different titles and really where he came from. To me, that was the more interesting thing to learn about him, was that he's an Italian guy who grew up in a place that was run by the French, and then because he had no other choice, kind of fell in love with like French ideals and defended the French and fought for the French. And I don't know, there's a lot of information out there about him that I just, this isn't where we cover that in these bite-sized bios, because they are bite-sized. I'm trying to keep them, the original idea of this was to have very small, quick bios. They've gotten a little bit extended as we go on here. I think the last one was almost 15 minutes long. That will not be happening here. There's not much more to say about this guy. We have his personal life to cover, and then his actual exiles and deaths. We'll run through those real fast, and we'll get you guys out of here. Maybe listen to some more HDTH or another bite-sized bio. So, on March 9th, 1796, Bonaparte married this woman named Josephine de Beauharnais. That couldn't have been the way her name was pronounced. But while he loved her, I think, she didn't bear him any children, which is a big deal back then. So he had the marriage annulled, and he married Marie Louise of Austria. Ooh, Marie Louise. He had one child, Napoleon II, and he did have a number of illegitimate children, which I've already posted one on the Twitter account, because I just thought it was so interesting. You don't think about the time between, or how long ago this history was, or maybe that it wasn't that long ago. So when you realize that there's a picture of Napoleon's son, like an actual photograph, I don't know, it tripped me out. So he was exiled, old Napoleon was, twice in his life. The first exile, he was exiled to Elba, an island called Elba, and this is with Paris under threat. Napoleon was forced to abdicate his powers, and the victors drew up the Treaty of Fontainebleau. It's pretty cool. As the former emperor, he was sent packing to an island off the coast of Tuscany, and instead of being completely stripped of his power and titles, basically he was allowed to have control over the island, which probably, looking back, was one of their issues, because he basically just, after 300 days, he just kind of slipped away and came back to France, probably because he was running things over there. So like I said, he comes back, and he decided the time is right to make a triumphant return to France, and he assembled some troops, and that's when he went to fight Waterloo. Everybody knows Waterloo. He loses Waterloo for whatever number of reasons. They say basically he probably didn't attack soon enough. He was waiting for the mud to dry, but when he did that, it allowed for the Prussian forces to come from like the east or something like that. It just messed it all up. So he didn't win. That is, that's probably always going to bother him. And so he was exiled again. Right, this time the major European powers had learned their lesson. He would not be running the island, and Napoleon was sent away to the shores of West Africa on a remote British-controlled island called St. Helena. He was kept under constant watch by the British guards and was actually treated rather well. Like I said, he wasn't actually in control of the island itself. He resided in a large house and was fed good food, but as any man feels after a fall from grace, he was deeply depressed. This time there would be no escape, and he would die about 5.5 years after his initially being exiled. So that brings us to his death. In February of 1821, Napoleon's health began to deteriorate rapidly, and he reconciled with the Catholic Church, before he went on to his spiritual home. And by March, he had become confined to a bed. Napoleon died on the 5th of May, 1821, at Longwood House at the age of 51, supposedly of stomach cancer. His last words were, France, l'armée, tête d'armée, Josephine, which translates to France, the army, the head of the army, Josephine, which in French or English does not mean a lot to me. Shortly after his death, an autopsy was conducted, and Francesco Antomarchi, the doctor who was conducting the autopsy, cut off Napoleon's penis. Don't really know why, but he did. His heart and intestines were also removed and contained in two separately sealed vessels, and they were placed in his coffin at the feet of his corpse. So some weird stuff happened to him post-mortem. In his will, he asked to be buried on the banks of the Seine, but the British governor said he would be buried on St. Helena. He's like, you're getting what you're going to get, and you're going to like it. Let's see, so he has a tomb, in Paris in 1840. They brought his remains back to France. They opened the casket to make sure it was still him. Good call. And despite being dead for nearly 2 decades, he was actually very well preserved. And he actually ended up having a state funeral in France in 1840. All right, if you loved what you just heard, there is more where that came from over at hdthappen.com. There you will find a written version of what you just heard, as well as photos and videos that helped me create the episode. As always, like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps the pod grow. Give me 5 stars if you really liked it, and if you want to just give me 2 stars and tell me why you didn't like it, I am totally open to that too. Thank you guys for pressing play. I will see you in a few days with the next How Did That Happen?
The holidays start here at Baker's with a variety of options to celebrate traditions old and new. Whether you're making a traditional roasted turkey or spicy turkey tacos, your go-to shrimp cocktail, or your first Cajun risotto, Baker's has all the freshest ingredients to embrace your traditions. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
We've locked in low prices to help you save big store-wide. Look for the locked in low prices tags and enjoy extra savings throughout the store. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.